Good day, and welcome to the Age of Reason. Today is Saturday, March 21st, 2015. This is a show that promotes positive atheism, knowledge, and common sense. I'm your host, Angel, and with me today is Ray, and we're going to cover biblical and Christian fallacies, and we're going to finish off with a bit on evolution. Just a reminder, if you'd like to contact us, you can reach us via email at tv-ageofreason@tv-ff.com. You're also invited to join the Facebook page at facebook.com/ageofreason. So we're just going to do a quick intro. Again, my name is Angel. For my background, I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, so there was not a lot of diversity up there, just a lot of snow. So actually, I was raised atheist in this environment from my parents. My mom was a pretty strict atheist because she was raised Catholic in Brooklyn, actually, in a Catholic school in Brooklyn. So between her bad experiences there and then bad experiences with life, she ended up becoming an atheist. My dad was never really religious, and so I grew up in a pretty open household. Obviously, I think, so the only time I ever went to church was with a friend of mine if I ended up spending a Saturday night at their house. So I've basically been atheist my whole life. There were a couple times, though, that I have been interested in religion and interested in philosophy and just knowing about the world. Actually, I had a few pagan friends growing up, and so I got into paganism for a little while. And for a little while after that, there was a point in my life I got religious. I'll probably go into detail about that later, but obviously I'm atheist again, so born again atheist. So yeah, that's pretty much about me.
I'm Ray, and my parents are originally from Puerto Rico in the Dominican Republic. They grew up Catholic. They did not choose to pass that on to me. I think a lot of people have bad experiences with Catholicism, but my father's in the military, and I grew up in every city and every state you can count. I did attend Christian private school for my entire life. I went on to Christian university even, and basically my parents never pressured me into taking up a religion or pursuing religious activities. They were pretty open with it, but they did maintain Christian, standards in the household, like no lying, no stealing, all that jazz. Through my own experiences and my own education and my own willingness to research these things on my own, I came to the conclusion that I would like to be atheist, and so here I am.
But you're an atheist who still does not lie nor steal.
Yes. Well.
I mean, I think, as much as people call them, Christian values, it's really human values. If you're a human with a conscience, you should know not to steal, you shouldn't murder, you shouldn't cheat. Yeah. But people tend to, grow up thinking them as Christian values and calling them Christian values. Well, I think that's it for our intros. So just to throw out this note, JC's documentary on the Judeo-Christian Islamic religions is going to be coming out, so here's a first teaser.
I believe there is no hope for the human race as long as religions endure. With them gone, there would be less division and more unity. On that note, open your eyes and put the holy books down. Take control of your destiny. Credere in niente ed essere nella vostra protezione contro tutto. Requiescat in pace.
Alright, so the next topic we're just going to touch actually upon language, specifically scientific language, which almost kind of ties into people's mentality again, is we were just talking about Christian values are really actually human values, you know, throughout different cultures. But when it comes to something like language, people tend to, you know, if they already have a view on something, they tend not to change their mind about it if they've been raised that way their whole life. And there are a lot of people today in the States who don't understand scientific language because it's something that you're not really taught when you're growing up. Yes, you're taught science, but there's a lot of language within science that people really don't touch upon in standard education. Yes, we go over basic sciences, but when you actually enter that community to study, say, college level or above science, language takes a big role. And I think one of the things that a lot of people tend to, you know, if they want to argue against science versus religion, a lot of the things that they talk about is, oh, theories, like the theory of evolution, you know, which we're going to get into near the end. But people really don't understand the word theory, I think. So actually, if you look up the dictionary definition of it, it's a well-substantiated explanation of some aspect of the natural world. So basically, if you throw tests at a certain hypothesis and none of these tests go against it, it's pretty well known that you can say, okay, this is something, there's a theory here, there's something going on, this is the explanation that we can make about it. For example, you know, if you were to drop this pen, you know, on the floor or something, you know that it's going to go down and it's not going to go up. So, and unless there's something to change that, we know that we have a theory of gravity. So just to throw this in there, actually, I wrote down the definition of the theory of gravity. And it's basically a theory that any two particles of matter attract one another with a force directly proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. There's a lot in that explanation, I think, and you really have to sit down and think about it, you know, and whether or not you really understand that or can come to understand it is really based on education. I'm pretty sure that you would agree.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of people want to talk about, oh, you guys just have theories, blah, blah, blah. Well, the theory of gravity is a theory, but I don't see you arguing that by trying to jump off of a building praying to God, right? Because you know it's not going to work.
I think a lot of people, they hear the word theory and they think it's just an idea.
Right.
They don't understand that it's something that people are working on, something that people are testing. It's something that there's a concept to it. It's not just, I have an idea, it's a theory. There's more to it.
Because, you know, in everyday language, you know, you might be doing something and you're like, oh, okay, I have this theory. You know, I bet if we go somewhere tonight, this thing will happen, right? That's not the same as the scientific theory.
Right.
So, obviously there are a lot of theories, but theories that are proven over and over and over again, actually they eventually become scientific law. Like the law of gravity. There's a law of gravity and there's a theory of gravity. They're actually two different things. I won't go into it right now, but you know, a lot of this stuff, actually, if you really want to learn about theories or anything in scientific language, it's actually, the knowledge is very accessible today.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of YouTube channels that are scientific-based channels. And so they go into stuff like this, what theories are, they go and do a lot of experiments. And even through something like Wikipedia, actually, if you go research on Wikipedia, for example, there is a lot of scientific language that they use there. Like, even I'll look up something, and there's a lot in, like, the first two sentences I don't understand. But that's not really, you know, an excuse to turn away from it.
It's just because it's a lot of work to access it mentally. Like, you can read the page fine, but you don't know what it says. You have to figure out what it means. You have to understand this and this and this to get to this. And people are just like, it's so much work. Oh, I don't understand it. I'm done with it, basically.
Right, right. Which is kind of funny because I feel like I do the opposite. You know, if I open up a Bible and I read this Old English, I'm like, totally lost. But, you know, I have to read it a few times. But still, if I'm going to be opening up a book, it's because I want to understand something. And the language really shouldn't stop you. It's just like, you know, at least it's still English. It's not like another language. But if you want to take a time to, say, learn Spanish or learn Japanese or whatever it is, you know, you want to take the time to understand it because it's something that you want to do. If you want to seek the truth about the world, or at least if you want to find different viewpoints, you should feel free to seek that knowledge as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to understand the world, why wouldn't you go out into the world to figure it out?
Right.
That's the part I don't understand about a lot of people. They're very closed-minded. They're very tight in their small communities, and they don't venture out to understand these different concepts or these different places or these ideas, things, science, anything that's just not a part of their little mindset in their bubble.
Right.
And then everything becomes this horrible, frightening thing to them.
Right. Like, I think, you know, if you're raised a certain way with certain knowledge, or let me rephrase that, if you're raised with a certain understanding of the world about you, you know, you have that comfort with it, right? You have that familiarity. And when it comes to something like, you know, if you start learning science in school and they start throwing these terms at you that maybe you've never heard of, you know, you could be a little scared about it because you don't quite understand it. Although, unfortunately, I think in some very hardline Christian families, you know, they actually tell their kids not to learn this stuff.
Yeah.
Which should never be something that even should cross a parent's mind. I think that a parent should always encourage their child to learn as much as possible about the world and then make their own decisions.
Yeah.
So just because their parents might not understand a certain, you know, how science might work or how language works, that's not an excuse to stop your children from learning.
Yeah, and a lot of times, in a few of my schools that I went to, my Christian schools, one thing I really did enjoy is we did have to read the Bible, we did have to study it, we did have to, you know, go through all this and memorize this and that, but at the same time, we had to have this big old book of, you know, different languages with us when we read it, because they would say, well, what does this word mean in the original language? Was it the same? No, it's not the same as it is today. I mean, it's a completely different time. It's a completely different language. The amount of translations that a Bible has gone through to get to where it is today is nothing like it was in the original language. So a lot of times my teachers would say, I don't want this version. I don't want what you just wrote down. You better figure out what that originally said and then talk to me about it. And I think that can open your mind a lot, because then you realize, holy crap, like everything that I'm thinking this means absolutely nothing of what it is. So I think people need to take a step back when they're so frightened by language or by you know, different concepts or something that sounds like really out there, because they don't realize the things they're reading, the things that they're told, is actually not what they're reading. It's some out there theory or out there weirdness that they don't realize, because they're reading the language in a completely different way.
Right. I noticed your use of the word theory there, but I'm like, I don't think it actually applies to to the situation.
They do it. They add theories in there. They'll try.
Yeah, to try to justify, I think, their version of the Bible. Actually, I'm really curious about the language thing, because I know I read a while ago in an article on a site that goes over religion and philosophy, and they were talking about the word virgin, and it doesn't mean somebody, it means closer to maiden, and not necessarily someone that hasn't had sex, but just like a young woman, I believe. Do you know about the history of that word?
No, I never really looked into it.
I'm actually curious about that, because of course not only the Bible goes over that, but so does it's very big in the Quran and Islam, when they're talking about virgins, but it doesn't really hold the same meaning in our culture and in our time today as it did back then.
Yeah.
So that's a very curious topic unto itself.
Yeah.
So, since we actually are talking about the Bible, we can go into we're we're going to go over a few Genesis verses. So if you could.
Yeah. So we have an English Standard Version Bible. It's written a little bit differently. Normally, I know a lot of people that use the New King James Version. That's got a lot of the thous and thou shalts and all that, and this is kind of the watered-down, good old American way to read it. We're kind of jumping into some weird verses we've gotten here, some strange things that go on in the Bible that a lot of people are unaware of, or they just kind of accept it as that's what happened back then. The story we're getting into right now is about Joseph. It's about this young guy. He was a really great kid. He was pretty young. I think he was a teenager when this happened. The story is about him and how he's having these cosmic dreams about stars and about, you know, the universe and things. And he's trying to explain it to his father and to his brothers, and he's telling them, I had these dreams and they were beautiful and they were great, and you know, I saw stars and I saw this and I saw that, and his whole family is basically like, wow, you are nuts, we should kill you. And so his brothers actually take him, throw him in a pit, and they're like, let's figure out how we're going to kill him, what are we going to do with him. And they actually come to an interesting conclusion. So I'm just going to read exactly what it says in here.
Oh, from Genesis.
Yes, this is Genesis chapter 37, verse 26. So Judah is one of his brothers. Ooh. Oh. And he goes on to say, Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and then conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him, and basically from then on they took him to Egypt and sold him for silver. So they, the mindset in this is basically, our brother's nuts, he's dreaming about stars, let's kill him. Okay, maybe not, let's not kill him. Why don't we sell him and make profit off of him? That's a good idea. And so it's kind of a strange concept to have in here, and people are like, yes, yes, praise God, every word in here is great, and you're just...
I think actually that verse is a very good example of, you know, a lot of people, and there's this concept in Christianity actually of avoiding responsibility, because when you have a God that you can basically blame everything on that happens because you have no control as a human, you don't have to accept the responsibility. In this case, it seems that, you know, the brother Judah, he doesn't want to have the blood of his brother on his hands, so he's like, oh, well, I'm going to avoid that by just selling him. So that's even better because now I don't have the blood on my hands. So it's like his way of justifying actually I don't want to say more horrible action because I don't know what's worse, killing your brother or selling him into slavery. I think I would rather just be killed. So that's just, wow. It's amazing how he justifies that.
Yeah, basically just,
and they get the profit.
Yeah, and then they're like, well, he's our brother. Let's not kill him. Let's be nice about it. Let's sell him.
Yeah.
That's just, the justification is a little...
I guess it's better to live as a slave than to die. Maybe they didn't want him to meet God so soon before them. I don't know. But hey, they also got some good coin out of it. So they're like, this is a win-win-win situation.
Pretty much. What else do we have?
That's actually really horrible.
Okay, so then we're going on to chapter 38. We've got Judah and Tamar. So basically, again, this is just a little short one, but it's following along the treating people pretty much like objects. Just sell them, why not? Kill them, why not? So the wording in here is just so strange to me. It says, Judah took a wife. He took a wife. He didn't get a wife. He didn't, you know, find a wife. He took a wife for his firstborn son, and basically leaves it at that. So he went out, he found a woman, was like, this one's good, and took him and said, that's for my son. It's not like finding a shoe or a dress or something and going, this one's a good one, I'm going to buy this one and take it home. Like, I just, the same. Yeah, I don't understand why people are being passed around like this, like objects, and it's just so accepted.
I think it's, you know, it's people, yes, but women especially, I think, because I know that in the Bible they're not mentioned too much. All the main characters, with mainly the exception of Mary, they're not figures that are known. They're not main figures. I think everybody knows who Mary Magdalene is, but nobody really knows who Tamar is because she's only mentioned a few times.
Yeah, it's
So,
one of those hidden gems.
Yeah, and I think it's curious because, of course, the boy, the firstborn son, ended up being killed later because he ended up being vile. So what happens is that Tamar is passed on to the brother, and she's supposed to become his wife or wait on him. And it's just like, basically like cattle.
Yeah.
Where, okay, well, your first owner died. And yes, I will say owner because it's exactly what the husband was. So now we're going to pass you on to your next owner. And of course, if something happened and there was no husband, like what ends up happening with her is she ends up going back to her father, which is her owner, really, in the end.
And the only reason really she goes back to him is because she has to wait for another man to become of age. So
now what's curious is that this isn't just a culture thing. This is something that I think Christians are like, okay, this is a different place, a different time. It doesn't work like that, and I'll tell you why, like right here, because there is this joke meme actually on the internet that if God could have banned slavery or bacon, well, he ended up choosing bacon. So he was fine with slavery. He's fine with telling women to stay in their place, so to speak, from the Christian point of view. And that's below men. And even today, this is the same situation because there's nothing in the Bible or in Christian teachings that say, okay, well, women are actually equal to men. We're of the same species. We're the same people. We all have thoughts. We all have feelings, dreams, etc. But if you're a woman, just because you are biologically different, you suddenly get treated as less of a human being. And this is actually where a lot of modern day, well, a lot of old and modern day problems come in because, we don't have, they say we have equality and we really don't.
yeah.
And especially in a lot of cultures today, there's still no equality for women, and they're still treated in this, chattel sense of, okay, well, we're just going to pass you on because you're nothing. Of course, a great modern day example is what's going on right now with ISIS. And I don't know if the American news or if the UK news has touched upon this a lot or any news outlets, but there are stories of women who have escaped these areas that the ISIS has taken over. So basically these guys come take over. They do round up all the women of any age, and they take them to this area to be passed out. It literally is like a cattle drive because the ISIS fighters will come in, choose a woman, and then that's the one that they're gonna marry or do whatever it is that they want to do with.
Picking out horses.
And it really is. Actually, I read a story of a woman, there was a 16-year-old girl who tried hanging herself because she didn't want to be raped, and so actually she did end up succeeding in hanging herself. There was another story where two sisters tried choking themselves to death. They tried choking each other. One was 12, one was 13, I think. Oh. And they wanted to choke each other because they didn't want to, but unfortunately they didn't succeed. Oh. Unfortunately, one just ended up losing her voice for like a week. I don't even know what happened to the other one. But this mentality is an Islamic mentality. But it is also a Christian mentality, but it's one that doesn't really apply in today's world so much, except in certain cases. For example, a few years ago, I lived in Ohio for a year. A very, very Christian, like hardcore Christian families there. The women, I'm pretty sure they didn't speak in church. They wore skirts all the time. There was a daughter who was actually my age. And when they told me that she was my age, I couldn't believe it because she was so very, she was very quiet. She was very naive about the world. I couldn't really talk about anything with her. Most of my interaction was actually with her mother because her mother happened to be a seamstress and I needed something made. But the one time I went over to the house to look at this item that I was buying, the father was present and just watching me like a hawk, because, I'm pierced, I'm tattooed, I didn't have so many tattoos back then, but I was still obviously very rebel to what their concept of a woman should be and should look like, because I was very outspoken. I had my own views. I obviously wasn't Christian. And so, you know, the women, it's very curious because they just had no power, but they were very content with their position.
Yeah.
But again, the girl was extremely naive. She wasn't allowed to go on a date by herself. You know, just none of that. And I just could not believe her lack of world knowledge, really. Like, all she knew was the Bible. And when I asked about her activities, oh, you know, she knew how to sew, she could cook, you know, all these very traditionally womanly activities.
Right.
And she really didn't have any interest beyond that.
Yeah,
like, she didn't even listen to music.
Yeah, I had to deal a lot with girls like that growing up because, of course, all my friends from school were all, you know, very, very extremely, almost violently Christian, I would say. A lot of them were Pentecostal, and in the Pentecostal view, the women, they are not allowed to wear men's clothing, so they can't wear things like pants.
Yeah.
They have to wear skirts that go past your knee. They're not allowed to cut their hair. They're not allowed to wear makeup. They're not allowed to adorn themselves in any way, like no jewelry, no nail polish, nothing. It was everything I loved, so it was just very difficult for me. But at the same time, you know, basically the rules for men were make sure your hair doesn't look messy or go past your collar, and rule your household. And so I always felt like, why are they looking at me in this way, like I'm such this inferior thing? Because I always had very, very outspoken questions about things in class, or I would question, you know, certain verses in the Bible or certain concepts, and they would get mostly the men would get very upset with me, the male teachers, the pastors, they would get very, very upset with me, like, learn your place, why are you asking me this? And it was very difficult. And one day in school, I asked a question. It was about the pastors, the preachers. I said, how come there aren't very many women?
Oh, yeah.
And one of the male teachers, he got very, 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 very upset with me, and he's like, women are not allowed to preach the Word of God. I said, well, why not? He said, because it's not their place. That's not what they do. The Bible says that men must preach, not women. And from then on, I was just like, my mind is blown. I don't know what to do with you guys. Like, I can't ask you questions. I can't learn. I can't progress in any way other than I know my place. And I think that's just such a hard concept to accept in today's world. Like, why wouldn't you want to progress past this little bit of information?
Right.
Why?
Actually, and I know that today in a lot of churches there are women who teach, but they often do like the Bible studies. So my understanding is that they're allowed to do it, but only if they're teaching other women. They can't teach other men.
They're not
and
allowed
they can
to teach other men.
Children.
Yeah.
Like young children. So like once a boy, I guess, gets past a certain age, he has to, you know, not listen to her anymore and start going to the male teachers. I mean, I don't know. Are men's brains bigger? No. Are they built differently? Well, a little bit, but, you know, as we know, we understand that, yes, there are biological differences, but our thinking is still the same. It's not like we can't understand this.
Yeah.
Actually, it's interesting because even in science, you know a lot of male names, you know, of the inventors and the scientists who discovered all these things and the scientists who got these awards. But actually, if you really pay attention, there are a lot of women who worked on those projects with the men and did not get the credit simply because they were women. Why? It has nothing to do with the scientific community. It has to do with the American community that we are raised in this fairly Christian American community that teaches, okay, well, women aren't worth it.
Yeah.
Just like there was a woman in England who, you know, she was a scientist and she made a great discovery, but she was not allowed to be part of the scientific college simply because of, to be quite frank, she did not have a dick. So it's really ridiculous because you're cutting off half the human race. And when you cut off half the human race, or more than that for other reasons, because people are black, so they were slaves, you know, for a long time in America, or people, these people are poor, so they just need to stay in their place. So then you're cutting off more and more and more of the population. So the only way you can advance your culture is through like 10%, which really you're not advancing your culture at all, and you're not helping your people. And it seems like, in the Bible, so many of these women are treated as, nothing more than like sheep, that they couldn't contribute. They weren't allowed to contribute to society. And what kind of human life is that? That just because, from the Christian point of view, okay, if you're born a woman, it's not your fault. God made you a woman. So basically he cursed you into this horrible life where you have to do what your father says, and then you have to do what your husband says, and you're not allowed to have your own opinion about anything. The only thing you have to do is, spread your legs.
And cook me a meal.
Yeah, and cook meals, basically, and keep the house, which seems awfully convenient for the men involved. I mean...
Yeah, if I could have it my way.
This is definitely a man-made religion. People say, oh no, it's God's religion, but, if I was an all-powerful deity, a deity that could have the power to create, the earth and the universe, why would I tell this one species that I obviously favor that, oh, by the way, half your species is below the other half? And actually more than half, because slavery is okay. So it depends on the position that you were born into, which you can't change, which is also very convenient for, people who rule, because then their power will be challenged, because then they're like, oh, God put you in that place, that's where you need to stay. Well, how bloody convenient for you.
Yeah.
So it's just, if you're born into a, for example, in India, they have the caste system. If you're born as an untouchable, that's it. You're at the lowest rung of life for the rest of your life. And I'm pretty sure that every person should agree today, every person who has reason should agree that that is not a very good system.
No, not at all.
Well, neither is this form of Christianity, which really is the one form of Christianity. The difference between then and now is that we have more freedom to cherry pick what we want to follow and what we don't.
Yep.
God and Christianity are not the ones who got rid of slavery. That was mankind by themselves. It was politicians who decided to, and society as a whole, to get rid of that, because we as people decided this is not a good thing to have. And eventually we also decided, okay, women are actually equal to men, so let's, give them rights. They can vote, and they can have land, and they can have inheritance. Okay, it's not God who did this, it's not Christianity. So your Christian values aren't about equality, they're about oppression and keeping people in their place.
Even the concept of a dowry just blows my mind, because back in the day, you wouldn't, most of the time people would marry a woman for her dowry. Like, I'm going to marry you, but what do you come with? Like, you come with land? Do you come with money? Like, what's your daddy going to give me? And it's just, it's that pushing of just, you're not a person, you're just an object, and we're going to progress in this way, and you can come along if you want to, and just leave it at that.
But if the dowry wasn't enough, and even this still happens today, if the dowry is not enough, the woman can be killed.
Yeah.
Because they got pissed off at the father. So kill the woman. And, I really don't understand this mentality where people can look another human being in the eyes, which we all know is the most powerful part of you as a person is your eyes. How can you look at another person and just deem them to be unworthy of life, or unworthy of equality, or anything, of happiness? And that's really what they're taking away. So, well, I think we got a lot out of that tiny little verse.
Yeah, we did.
let's move on to the next one.
Let's see. All right, so moving on to chapter 45. Joseph, the guy that his brothers decided to kill and to sell into slavery, he goes through some things. He's in Egypt. He's kind of stuck there, and the Pharaoh actually takes a favor to him and is like, "You're a pretty cool guy." And he tells him this: "When the report was heard in the Pharaoh's house, Joseph's brothers have come. It pleased Pharaoh to his servants, and Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'Say to your brothers, do this: load your beasts, go back to the land of Canaan, take your father, take your households, come to me, and I'll give you the best of the land in Egypt, and you shall eat the fat of the land. So basically, everybody loves Joseph except for his family. And even though they tried to do these horrible, horrible things to him because God helped him through this, now he gets to have whatever he wants and also reward the family that was doing these horrible things to him. And it's kind of strange to me because they tried to kill him and now they're like, whatever you want, it's good because God has given it to them. So...
yeah. Well, I almost wonder, is that a sort of forgive your enemies mentality? Or, yeah, I know you guys wanted to kill me. You just sold me into slavery. But, hey, you're going to be rewarded.
Here's a nice house on top of the money you made off of me.
So I guess this is Pharaoh's order, I guess.
Yeah.
But since Christians hold a mentality, you know, the hardline Christians hold a mentality that nothing happens without God's will, clearly God approves of this family getting rewarded even though they sold his brother into slavery.
Yeah, this vicious behavior is being rewarded grandly, apparently. And it's perfectly accepted as, yes, this is God's will, and whatever God does is good, and we should believe that and follow that, and the end.
Which, of course, again goes into, you know, because it's God's will, it must be a good thing. Or even if you have things that, you know, you want to say, okay, this isn't good, Christians usually say, well, God works in mysterious ways. We don't always know his plan. So this is just another way to justify something that's actually really horrible. Another way to, basically, you're brushing off a problem of society that you don't want to deal with, you know. But I'm pretty sure that if you suddenly were taken as a slave and made to do stuff, your mentality should change really quick. I really don't think that, you know, let's say you have, just as an example, let's say Jehovah's Witnesses are suddenly like, hey, we're allowed to have slaves. And so they go to the next town over and suddenly enslave everyone, even other Christians, right? Let's pretend for a minute that the American judicial system is not going to get involved because this is a religious matter, okay? And so everybody becomes, you know, if you and your family suddenly become a slave to these Jehovah's Witnesses because you're not a Jehovah's Witness, how are you as a Christian going to deal with that? Are you going to say, oh, well, this must be my lot? You know, this is God's intention. Hell no, I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure you're going to grab a gun, a knife, something, and defend yourself. You should defend yourself. You should defend your family because it's not the right thing to do. Unless, of course, it's God's plan, in which case you probably should just put up with it. Sorry.
Basically, I think a lot of it would go down like this. It's God's plan. I'm going to deal with it in God's way. And I'm sure the slave owners in the situation would say, no, we don't want you believing that because that's exactly what we're against, blah, blah, blah. They would kill you for it. You would become a martyr for your other fellow Christians. That you need to continue believing what you believe and standing up for what you believe, even if it kills you in this ridiculous situation that can be completely avoided if you just left. But I don't understand why people want to keep this old school completely.
And I'm pretty sure if you were taken as a slave, it would be the Christian thing to do to just accept it. So, because clearly that's God's will.
Yeah.
But on the presumption that you don't take it that way, if you do defend yourself, is that God's will or is that your will? And you really have to question that because, oh, is it God's will that I got taken as a slave and then that I freed myself from it? This is really a argument, actually, that you can't make because, first of all, you have to claim as a Christian that you don't know God's will because you don't. The second thing is, even if God wasn't involved, it's still a bunch of humans and human actions making this situation happen in the first place. So again, you can't prove God is involved at all. But yeah, I think we've pretty much covered those topics.
Yeah, we can close there because that's going to open into Exodus. So
yes,
that's a whole nother ball game.
Okay. Since we are sort of on the topic too of society, another topic that we're actually going to cover a little bit is the situation of homelessness, which if you want to open up a little bit with that. We've been talking about it a lot recently.
Yeah, it's come up a lot recently. I pretty much lived everywhere. I'm not from anywhere in particular, but I spent most of my time in the state of Hawaii. I'm not going to say that I'm a professional about things on Hawaii, but I know quite a bit, and I know that the homeless situation over there is absolutely horrendous. A lot of places in mainland America were handing out one-way tickets to Hawaii to homeless people so they could go and basically be a bum on the beach. Why not? Why not go to paradise? Unfortunately, because apparently it's God's will, the islands are overpopulating with homeless people, and it's affecting the tourism, it's affecting a lot of things, and basically, so the people that got moved there to be homeless are being moved elsewhere to be homeless. It's not being taken care of. They're just people pushing here and there. It's affecting the whole state. The state's got a lot of money issues. They have a lot of educational issues. There's some religious issues, and it's just, I think people are really disillusioned with Hawaii because they think it's this beautiful, clean, perfect, pristine place that's so untouched. And when you get there and you see that there's homeless people on every corner, that you can't walk through certain parts of town because you will get stabbed, and it's just...
But I don't see this on TV.
Yeah, nobody sees this. You don't see it. No one talks about it. It's this, the hidden gem of Hawaii is the horrible, horrible, horrible life you'll have if you choose to live there and you have no money. Basically, it's a place for the rich, and the rich are very segregated from the rest of the locals in Hawaii, and it's a very difficult situation. But a lot of it, I've noticed, is there's a lot of young people that are extremely just in bad situations over there and become homeless very, very easily because they're young, they're uneducated, they have nothing, they have no one, and there's nowhere to go on that tiny little island. And just over the years, the young people, the population of homelessness is just building up more and more and more, and no one knows what to do about it.
Right.
It's getting a little extreme over there.
And what's interesting too is, you're right that a lot of people these days who are homeless are young. Like, for example, the situation in the UK with so many being under 25 years of age. Yeah. And I would dare say that the situation is most likely the same in America. And I think when it comes to homelessness, people really don't understand that not everyone has a family just because you do. Not everyone has the education you do. And so, you know, there are also a lot of situations where, for example, I had a friend whose brother decided one day just to pack up, go all the way across the country from North Carolina to Seattle, Washington. He's like, oh, I'll find a job there, blah, blah, blah. He didn't find a job because you need to have an address, a home address to get a job. And vice versa, to even get a house there or to get an apartment, you need to have a listed job.
Right.
So you can't get one without the other. And of course, again, you know, just because some people have something and so they don't understand a certain situation, it's not the same for everybody. Just as an example, let's say if I were to lose my job tomorrow and get kicked back to the U.S., I don't have parents. They both died. So I don't have a house because the house they were rented in, the house that I grew up in was demolished. Another family lives in that house now. The house that my parents rented before they died, obviously it wasn't theirs because it was rented. I have no connection to that area whatsoever. I have a sister, but she has a family and 3 kids. I can't interfere with that, except, you know, there are some people who have friends, they have siblings who can help them, but they can only help them for a few days, a week,
it's not a lifelong
month,
thing.
and then they're like, I'm sorry, I just can't do it anymore. And the people, of course, you know, you start to feel guilty about that, and so you're like, oh, okay, you know, I'll be fine, I'll sleep under the bridge. And that's what a lot of these people end up doing, is because they don't want to be a burden, but they do want to take care of themselves. But it's very hard, and I think that people also have an impression that, oh, there are homeless shelters, there are food places you can, you can go and get food, blah, blah, blah. But it's not the same all over the states, which is another topic that we were talking about recently with some legislation that was passed that, you know, in some cities, it is actually a crime to feed homeless people.
Yep, that was in Florida, actually.
Oh.
While I was there in Florida recently.
Lovely state.
Yep, very lovely state. People were being arrested for feeding the homeless.
Can you get arrested for feeding the pigeons?
No. You can get yelled at, though.
Interesting.
But you can't get arrested for feeding pigeons or ducks. But you can get arrested for feeding fellow people that are in need. There was one particular story. There was a very old man. I believe he was a veteran. I'm not quite sure. I don't remember. But he was well known in his area in Florida. And he was known for helping out and feeding the homeless. And they passed a law that you're not allowed to do it. And he said, I don't care. I'm helping these people. They need something. No one else is helping them. They're stuck in this situation. I'm helping them. And he continued to feed them. Got arrested, which is ridiculous. Yeah. And he was released eventually, but I think he continued to feed the homeless.
I love that we live in a world where you think it's okay to throw a 90-year-old man in jail just because the law says so.
Yeah.
And
the reason he was thrown in jail was because he's helping people.
Helping people, yeah. Which is very interesting. Actually, I'm going to digress just for a second, because a lot of, that happens in Christianity a lot, that these things are justified just because this book that you don't even know the author of said, because this Bible says one thing, that's all you're going to go off of. And when people bring up a point, they're going to say, oh, well, I'm going to just shake my head because the Bible says so, and I'm not going to understand your viewpoint. These people get very upset. And I sometimes wonder if they understand why they're getting upset. Because the thing is, when you have an argument with somebody, and you know that the other person is right, or you have a feeling that you know that you're on the losing side, that's when you get upset.
That's when you defend, and it's like a kid.
But that's because, but at least in the judicial system, we have letter of the law and we have spirit of the law. I find that whole story about that man being regrettable because they took the letter of the law and they arrested him instead of just maybe bringing him home or something and saying, don't do it again. I can't say if the policemen agree with the law or not, but unfortunately it is their job to do this thing.
Right.
And actually, as basic policemen, they only have so much power to say we're not going to arrest this guy, which really they could lose their own jobs over.
Right.
Yeah, end up being one of those homeless people.
Right.
So, I think, again, this is almost like a Christian society thing that, because it says so, this is what's going to happen. Instead of going with your heart, with your feelings, with what you know should be right. You shouldn't throw an old man in jail just because he's helping other people.
Right.
It's just horrible.
I mean, I could understand in Alaska if you're like leaving food out for animals, there's bears and there's wolves and there's things that can kill you. I could understand that being illegal. Right. Don't give out food to the animals because more will come. It's not the same with people. I mean, if somebody's hungry, help them. I don't understand what this anti-help, anti-homelessness thing is all about. It's just,
right.
If we can figure out a way to help, then it will also subside.
So coincidentally, it is actually, if you look at these the legislation against homelessness, most of that legislation, or actually I want to say all of it, comes from the Republican side of the House. And go figure that the Republicans are the ones who are like, oh, God bless America, and God this and God that, and everything that happens is God's will. Let's pass some legislation that the homeless can't be fed. Or
it's
that
God's will.
Yeah, exactly, which is, again, very awfully convenient for them, for the ruling party. Which again should really throw any thinking mind off balance and have them realize that you can't have this mentality where you think everything is God's will. Because if you have that mentality, please explain to me why we have homelessness at all. These people who are trying to make it and they can't through no fault, well, I'm not going to say through no fault of their own, but in a lot of situations,
a lot of things come into play.
That also goes with the case with people who are born with deficiencies or with diseases, babies who are born with AIDS, and I know that some Christians will actually be like, well, clearly the mother did something that she shouldn't have done.
Or
okay.
a lot of people will say that, well, that child just has to overcome whatever they have.
See, even if that was the case, it's like, first of all, so it's okay that you're going to punish a newborn baby for something the mother did. So that's okay to your Christian mentality. And then, as you just said, well, you know, the baby will overcome it. If it doesn't, it's God's will. All you're doing is you're avoiding the problem. You're not trying to solve it. Actually, very interestingly, when I was at work not too long ago, I was there for duty, and there was another guy. He's actually I don't know where he's from in Africa, but you know, he's in. I'm actually not too familiar with him, but I know that I knew another guy who was from the same country he was. I could, you know, on their accents. He was actually a preacher who would preach to me all the time. Even though I wasn't asking for it, I wasn't in a church, I was at my workplace. He would sometimes come to my workplace, and the moment he saw me, he'd be like, you know, God, God, God. And I wanted him, I was very relieved when he left. So then I met another guy from the same country who is actually very nice. He's very friendly. He'd be like, hey, how are you? Good day. And he would do this, you know, as greeting us. I'm like, okay, that's nice, that's fine. Then one day, actually I was wearing this ring with a star on it, or a pentagram, if you will, even though a pentagram has a circle. So I happened to be wearing this ring, which, by the way, the only reason I have it is because Marilyn Manson has it. But besides that point, he sees this ring on me, and I see him looking at it, and he looks up at me, and he smiles. And I know that you know that smile. It's a very friendly, it's that very...
That judgmental smile.
Yes, you know that he's judging. And he's like, oh, I'm going to save this one. Like, you can just see it so hard. And meanwhile, I'm just sitting like this, right? And he's like, you're so quiet. And I look up, and you know, I'm like, everyone's really quiet because everybody's on their phones, right?
Right.
And I said, yeah, I'm thinking, you know, I got a lot on my mind right now. And he goes, well, you don't have kids, right? I don't know how he assumed that about me, but okay, besides that point. He's like, you don't have kids, so what possibly could you be thinking of? You know, what could possibly be on your mind that's bothering you so much that you're so quiet? And I just straight up looked at him, and I said, world issues, world politics, you know, world problems. I like to think on those. And he goes, oh, well, you know, God is the one who, and actually I can't even say what he said after that because I got so out of my mind at that point with shock that he even mentioned God, that I remember only cutting him off, and I said, look, I don't believe in God, and I never will, so don't talk to me about it. And he kept going. He's like, you know, this is God's will. You can't change anything. You know, we don't have the power to do that. Only God does. Okay, here's the thing. If we didn't have the power to change anything, we'd still have slavery. Women would also still be treated like slaves. Yep. We'd still be living in the Dark Ages because fuck science, according to Christianity, forgive the language. You know, forget this world mentality, just like we were talking about, I believe his name is Giorgio Bruno, who's an old, he was a Christian monk way back actually in the Middle Ages, who decided to have this bigger worldview that we're not so special. His worldview is basically, okay, the sun is probably just like the stars. The stars must be like the sun, and so they must have other planets orbiting around them. So that means that there could be there's other life out there. Right. And of course, the other monks and the priests and the cardinal who heard this were not at all happy with that worldview because suddenly they were not so special anymore. And so they threw Bruno in this tiny cell. Actually, he ended up dying. He died like 9 or 10 years later, still in that cell, because he refused to drop his viewpoint. And you know, modern Christians, for some reason, in this day and age, when we're in the information age, we're in the technology age, and they still want to hold on to this backwater, tiny worldview. You know that.
You only need to think this much to understand it, and then you're done, and they're accepting it.
No, you don't even need to understand it. That's the lovely thing about it. You don't have to waste your brain cells to think, because God is the answer to everything. How's the universe created? God. I don't know why that satisfies people. It really doesn't. But the problem is, when you grow up in a Christian household, a very religious household, and you start asking these questions, because kids do that. They ask questions, they're curious. It's human curiosity. But the Christians will actually stamp it out of you so much that by the time you get older, you gain the same mentality. It's bad to ask questions. You don't ask questions. You don't question this.
Just accept it. Just nod your head. Accept it. You're fine. Get through it.
And priests would still be beating on people. Nuns would still be beating people if we, as human species, at least in America, we decided, hey, that's a bad thing. You can't do corporal punishment anymore.
Oh, at my schools you could.
Oh, well,
yeah.
I stand corrected. So
at my schools you could.
Because I remember one of the things that my mom could not agree with. Like, one time she told me this story. As I said, she went to a Catholic Italian school in Brooklyn, and the nun that she ran into in the hall didn't think that she had a hall pass, so the nun threw her down the stairs. And another time she got beat with a ruler because she asked a question that the nun didn't like. And so this really is the core Christian mentality. It really is. If you're a Christian who, I feel like if you're a Christian who obviously doesn't agree with that kind of stuff, if you're just like, hey, I'm not going to bother other people with my religion, I'm just going to live and let live, so I'll do what I will. You're still ignoring the basic problems, and you're still ignoring the fact that Christianity is okay with slavery, they're okay with demeaning women, it's okay with a lot of things, but the only reason we don't do that anymore is because mankind, ourselves, decided it's not a good thing.
Right. I think a lot of it, though, has to do with lack of education.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the young people today, they have absolutely no education on anything. They don't know anything. They know how to tweet and text, and then they're like, I'm okay. But really, a lot of my own education, I didn't learn it at top private schools. I didn't learn it at my fancy universities. I learned it on my own. I researched it myself, because we're not taught things that we need to know. We're not taught to ask questions. They always told us in school, when you're in college, ask questions and learn and this and that. And I was like, college will be great. And then I went to college and I was like, wow, it's not.
Right.
And because when you do ask questions, I mean, there's no answers. People don't want to answer you. People want to just talk about one thing and not go into these big important topics that you're like, we need to know this. How can we fix it if we don't know? Yeah. And it's just, I mean, it got to the point where I had several times I had students petitioning to my professors who would choose to fail me on something because they didn't like my worldview, or they didn't like my perspective, or they say, like, what you said was offensive. They would try to fail me, and I would have entire classrooms petitioning for the professors not to fail me just because of my worldview. They were telling them, this is, we're in university, we're thinkers, this is what we're doing, we're communicating these topics, and you're trying to block her from this, from us finding out what she's trying to explain, and it's just accepted as, just don't talk about these things.
Right.
If we don't talk about them, they'll go away, and God will fix it. Like,
that's not fixing the problem.
No.
At all.
It's not.